4. Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is Sonship Orientation, and this is session 62. Just to make a statement to bridge us from where we left off the last time to where we're going now, when we talked about that third major issue of that second commitment, the value of the effectual working. We were talking at the break, and for you to see the value of the effectual working, you have to see that as something that is necessary and something that is non-optional. You have to have both of these. You have to have the education and you have to have the effectual working. You have to have that edification. You understand what I'm saying? You have to have both of those. And Linda was saying, it's like oxygen. And so, you know what? If you would think of it like this, the effectual working is the ability to take that, just like your heart pumps blood all through your system to carry oxygen to everything. It's got to have that. If you're going to do this as a son, you have to have the effectual working. It's that necessary. I almost wish I hadn't erased that board now because I was walked over there to point to it. But is that making sense to you? Does everybody understand that? Though that's two sides. I don't even have a coin. That's two sides to the imaginary coin. Is that you have the education, but you have to see this as more than that. It's not just you showing up and getting some data and you kind of memorizing answers. It's not like that. It is you being taught. For instance, when you actually start the curriculum proper, the first thing you're going to be instructed in is godly wisdom. You're going to be taught that, but beyond being just taught that, that is supposed to effectually work in you so that it renews your mind and you really do begin to have godly wisdom in your thinking. That it's the effectual working that does that. And we were talking about how any part of your body that doesn't get oxygen carried to it, that dies off. In your sonship life, think of it like, I mean that way, or that you've got to have the effectual working of it. And so it's not just coming and getting answers. It really is saying, I want this to really be in me. I really want that produced in me. That's that necessary. And I want to say that to start off this next session, just so that we really do see, because that's the value of it. Without effectual working, you will not be, no matter how much data you have in your head, you won't be qualified to get up there and use that. Everybody understand that? Okay. And so now we're going to kind of get ourselves, and I feel like I'm hearing an echo. This must be my empty head. Okay, never mind. All right. Now what I'm going to do is take you to this last part, which I said what I want to do is take you to this last part and get us set up for what we're about to encounter when we get back into the book of Romans. And to do that, I'm going to take you back to what we've been calling the table of contents. Now, just so that everybody understands what we're talking about here, when we went back into the book of Proverbs, we found out, first of all, why we would go back to the book of Proverbs. That if you were going to find a place in Israel's program where the adoption curriculum was given, where that education was given for Israel, that you were going to have to go back to some place back there. And we've talked about that in previous sessions. I don't want to redo it now, but we discovered why you would go back to Proverbs. It not only had something to do with them being Proverbs, but it also had to do at the particular time that this was done, and it had to do with a particular people that were on the scene at that time, David and Solomon. But when we go back into Proverbs in chapter 1, of course, in verse 1, it's just taught. In fact, we'll read that in just a moment. All David is doing is just being introduced, the Proverbs. But in chapter 1, verses 2 through 5, That is what we've been referring to as, we'll continue to do that, is the table of contents. You know what a table of contents is in a book. You open that up, it gives you all the chapters, it tells you a title for each of those chapters. Your whole sonship curriculum is given right there by chapters. Now, I'm kind of saying it that way. It's not actually saying chapter 1. But that whole sonship curriculum is outlined for you in those verses. Everything from your first day when you start learning godly wisdom all the way to the last lesson that makes you a fully educated man of understanding. Every bit of that is contained in here, and it's broken down for you in just that way. Now, let's start with that first verse. I'm sorry. Here it is. Okay. To know wisdom and instruction. And you remember, we actually talked about, and I'm going to show you how this works. I meant to give you a handout on this today, and I failed to bring it. I've given it to you once before, but I knew you wouldn't have it with you. Does anybody put this in a notebook? Does anybody keep up with that? Okay. That's the third notebook? In Romans? Says, oh, really?
You were going to give us a page with it on.
Yeah, okay, and I will do that. We went through this part before, so let me just put this part up without explaining it. And but what we found in going through these verses is that there are 3 levels to your sonship education. So we're just going to put those up. And again, this is in past stuff, so you can go back and you can look at all of that and see how we determined that, how we broke all that down. But there are 3 levels to your sonship. And there are, within each of those levels, there are phases. There's 2 phases in each of those levels. Now you say, why in the world do I need to know this? Well, because what we're about to do now is I'm about to locate for you where you are on this, because, and by the way, just so you know, these phases may have more than one part. You right now have accomplished something that's on that board. You're already so far along. I really wish what we had done is we had read these whole things. Let me just plow forward here a minute. No, I didn't give you the whole thing. Can I just get you to turn over to the book of Proverbs and let's just read these 4 or 5 verses here. Because what I would like for you to do is I'd like to pull these things out that we've already seen before, and if we read it, it'll just call it to your attention. So Proverbs chapter 1. You know, when you get over to Romans 8 and you're told you're an adopted son, Paul's not defining that, he's not explaining that, he doesn't break down the curriculum, because he expects you already know about that from what you would have learned coming through the Bible in the order in which it's given to you. So look at verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. Verse 3. To receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment and equity. Now let's just stop right there for a moment. That to know wisdom and instruction. Now I'm going to put that up here because here's part 1 of that. To know wisdom and instruction. And the second part is to perceive the words of understanding. Now we see those 2 parts constitute phase 1 of your level 1 education. And even though you haven't actually been giving the wisdom, this is part of your education. The orientation to this really is something that's there. And now, verse 3 changes from to know and to perceive In verse 3, how does that to start out? To what? To receive. Now that's where you really start now to receive the education. So phase 2 is to receive, and then you have 4 things under that. You have, spell it, Michael. Wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. Now we are going to come back and talk about those. I just want to get them on the board so that you would understand. At the end of this level 1 process, the Bible is going to tell you that there are levels of attainment that you're going to get. Just like when you go to college your first year, you're called a what? You're called a freshman. But at the end of that freshman year, you go from being a freshman to a sophomore. Well, at the end of this level 1, you are, let me ask you this. When you start out level 1, what are you known as? What kind of a son are you? No, think, when you first start out. When you, right now. Yes, thank you. You're just, when you start out, you're just an adopted son. Your father has told you he's adopted you and he's going to start training you. But when you go through that first level of your education, then you become a what? You become a simple son. And that simple is not a derogatory term. It just means you're very one-dimensional. As we said before, it means you know just enough to hurt yourself. Okay, yeah, you know enough to get in trouble, but not enough to get out. But your education, fortunately, doesn't stop there. Then you go on to level 2. You add something to what you're getting here, and you're going to go on into level 2. All right, now, we'll fill this in as we go, but what I'm trying to get you to see here is the breakdown of this. So this first to know wisdom and instruction, and because we went through this, I'm hoping someone will remember, what are the 2 things about to know? To know it exists. So let me just put that over here. First of all, you have to know that there's an education to get. How many saved people even understand there is a sonship education outlined in the Bible? Very few. So the first thing is that you have to know that it's there before you can take advantage of it. What's the second part of this know? Thank you. To know the value of it. And now, wait a minute. Didn't we just talk about the last component of edification was to know the value of the effectual working? I want to tell you, you know now more about the value of this than you did back when we first did this work in Proverbs 1. When you were first introduced to it, you thought, oh, you know what? I want to work with my father. I want to do that. It has some value to you. But you're going to find out that the value as you go on through your sonship is going to get brought up over and over, and you're going to value this more and more and more. And that's what's at the very first. You're supposed to say this education exists. There is such a thing. And the second thing is that this should have value to me. My Heavenly Father is holding this out to me, and this ought to have some value. And that's what we're looking at in this first verse with regard to those 2 things. Now, here, I just want to show you some other verses. We're going to run them in a row up here about the increased understanding of the value of what you're being offered. Take a look at this one. Proverbs 2:4. You're familiar with this one. If thou seekest her as silver and searchest for her as for hid treasure. Remember, that was with regard to that being the top priority and the commitment to the education. But he said, this is how, by the way, if this is how valuable the thing is supposed to be, that's pretty valuable, right? All right, here's the next one. Proverbs 3:14. For the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies. Talking about wisdom here, this godly wisdom. And all the things thou canst desire are not to be compared unto her. Now you're really getting an idea of the value of this education, right? But let's go even further. Receive my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than fine gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to... See, it's the same thing again, isn't it? Are not to be... He said, here's how I want you to see this wisdom. So you can see as you keep going through the Proverbs, he keeps emphasizing this is how valuable this is. The next one, Proverbs 8:19. My fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold, and my revenue, we haven't even talked about this one yet, than choice silver. And we did talk about the merchandise, but we didn't go any further. Now he's talking about revenue. Not talking about them guys that hunt down the moonshiners, the revenuers. He's talking about something else. Proverbs 10:20. The tongue of the just is as choice silver, the heart of the wicked is little worth. He's trying to show you a comparison here to give you the value of it. And then 16:16. How much better is it to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding rather to be chosen than silver? So, now, this is the point where I want you to remember what we did in the last session. If all of these things really are working in you, when you've come to the place where you see what your Father is offering you is better than anything your heart can imagine. It truly is better. He's trying to draw you to a place, and if you remember in that last session, I said, what's a single word that your Father's trying to produce in you through all of this? And Karen said, love. And that is exactly what He is up to in all of those components that we saw in that last. That He wants you to love that. And I'm going to start referring to them like this from now on. The 2 E's. That's easier for me. Anybody know what the 2 E's are? Education and edification. Getting the knowledge, and then getting that knowledge in your inner man. Okay. So that's the 2 E's. You know, we're getting this long list of things, aren't we? Do you remember them all? Anybody remember that one? Justified into eternal life? Okay, now we got another one. The 2 E's. And it's not important to list all those things that we've done. So as a shortcut, that's how I'm going to refer to this. And what he's trying to do is, through the 2 E's, he is trying to get you to love that education and that edification. And you know what you're supposed to love? The process of it. This is part of that process. Now, I've heard you say, sometimes I leave here and I think, man, I can't hardly wait till we get back here for the next one. You know what that is? It's already producing that in you. Because Lord knows it's not anything else. It's not the fancy carpet on the floor. It's desiring this education and for it to effectually work in you. Now, let me show you the exhortation that shows you this is where your Father's headed with this. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 1. Hear, ye children, the instruction of a father, and attend to no understanding. For I give you good doctrine. Forsake ye not my law, for I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother. Remember, we went through this passage. He taught me also and said unto me, let thine heart retain my words, keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not, neither decline from the words of my mouth. Forsake her not, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. That really is where he's headed with this, is to say, I want you to love this wisdom. And by the way, when you see the value of it, that's part of what produces that love for that curriculum. Here's the next one in chapter 8. Riches and honor are with me. Now, this is wisdom talking here. Yea, durable riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. I lead in the way of righteousness, in the midst of the paths of judgment. See those ways and paths again? The paths of judgment, that I may cause those that love me to inherit substance, and I will fill their treasures. Does anybody remember back over in Romans 8 about anybody inheriting anything? Do you remember we talked about being heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ over there? And wisdom says, those that love me, I'm going to cause them to inherit substance. When you get out to those heavenly places, there really is something to inherit out there. And you'll be able to see that. I put Proverbs 2:8 back in here just because that's where we are back when we're looking at the commitment to edification. He keepeth the paths of judgment and preserveth the way of his saints. That's the verse that actually goes with that knowing the value of the edification. And that keepeth is to guard. And when Adam was told to keep the garden, that wasn't the part of it. Dressing it was the part that talked about taking care of the, all that. Keeping it meant to guard it against an enemy. And Adam failed to do that, by the way. That's why the serpent was able to beguile Eve. Those paths of judgment, when he talks about that is, generally speaking, I just want to explain this, the ability to discern right from wrong. Now, I know that you say, well, we have a lot of that ability, but there's going to be more to that as you're going to see. Okay. There's a point that I wanted to make here about, there's a point, I'm going to take you over to Matthew chapter 26. Because one of the things that you're going to be faced with is, if you begin to love this education, and it really does become part of your heart. I'm trying to think how to say this. Okay. One of the things that you're going to be shown that will cause you to love the sonship education is the glories that will be given to you as an educated son. To know what it is, people spend their whole lives doing things that unfortunately many times are not the thing they love the most. Being a preacher, and that means I show up through the years, I've shown up at a lot of hospitals. I've seen folks pass away. Been with a lot of families that have suffered a loss. But the one thing I've never heard for anybody that was right toward the end of their life, the one thing I never heard was, Brother Mike, I wish I had spent a little more time at the office. Never heard that. I never heard anybody say, you know what, I wish I'd have signed up for that bowling league. Because at the end, when you're really faced with the end of your life, do you know what you're talking about then? The things that are uppermost in your heart. That's what you talk about then. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has the right idea just because they come to the end of their life, but they tend to prioritize things a whole lot better about that time. I'll give you an idea. You don't have to die to do this. Here, I can do it for you like this. When your kids grow up and then they move off, and you were used to that home being full of sound and activity, and you were just begging for a break, all of a sudden when they move out, then you know what you're thinking? Man, this home is awfully empty. Or you see your kids are no longer little anymore, and you go, man, I wish I'd have spent more time with them when they were little. I wish I'd have done this. Our life is kind of like that. We look back and we see more easily after the opportunity is gone. We see the opportunities clearer than we did when we were in the midst of it. Well, I want to take you to something that's happening in the life of the Lord Jesus at the end of His life. And I want to show you something that's happening. He's just about to die on the cross, and He knows it. But I want to show you how this conversation pans out, because He's in one of those trials that He undergoes just prior to the crucifixion, where they're trying to get some evidence against Him so that they can execute Him. And so what they did is they got some witnesses together. They actually suborned witnesses. They actually, they paid some guys to, but you know what? I don't know, did they just pick the dumbest guys in the world or what? They couldn't agree on their witness against Jesus. They kept contradicting each other. Don't you know that has to be exasperating? You paid somebody to lie for you and they can't keep their lies straight? That's got to be frustrating, doesn't it? But look, here it is. And the high priest arose. Now the witnesses come and they do their thing. And then it says, and the high priest arose and said to him, answerest thou nothing? Because Jesus had no answer to those charges. What is it which these witnesses witness against thee? But Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God. He's just trying to get Jesus to say something that will justify what they're wanting to do to Him here. Now I want you to notice what happens here. The question is, are you the Christ, the Son of God? Now I want you to notice how Jesus answers this. Jesus saith unto him, thou hast said. Nevertheless, I say unto you, and I'm going to back that up because you'll keep reading it on me and I don't want you to. Notice how he just almost sloughs off that question. He says, I adjure thee by the living God, tell us, art thou the Christ, the Son of the living God? And you know what he says? You said it. That's really all he says about that. You said it. That's not the thing that's in his heart right here. Do you know what's in his heart and mind right here? Let's read it now and you'll see. Here we go. Jesus saith unto him, thou hast said. Nevertheless, I say unto you, hereafter shall you see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, he hath spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Of course you need to get rid of those witnesses. Those guys can't get their story straight. See, how convenient here. Behold, now you have heard his blasphemy. Oh, see, this is what he was after. When he says, are you the Christ, the Son of the living God? Jesus said, yep, you said it. But I want to tell you something else. After this, you're going to see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of glory. Do you know what those two things are? They are only two of the many glories that are waiting for him out there. Now think about this. He's come to the end of his earthly life. And you know what is on his mind? There's a glory out there. That's what's in his mind. And this sonship is going to produce a knowledge and an awareness of glories that is waiting for you. And you're not going to, look, God's not asking you to give your life right off the bat. It's not like you're going to turn to Romans 12:3 and now you're going to be, killed for your faith. That's not it. That's not it. But I will tell you this, all through that education, as you get educated in wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, in each one of those areas, you're going to be, they're not just about this, but you're going to get educated in the glories that are waiting for you up there. We've talked about it so much, and you've known about it so long, we don't even think about the gloriousness of it. You're going to get a glorified body. That's a glory. And that may not mean much to you right now. But when you get the doctrine that effectually works in you and you appreciate that for what it is, you're going to begin to look at that and go, wow. Now, some of you already have an appreciation for that because you get up and you hurt every day. And you could use a glorified body. You could use a body that doesn't hurt like all get out, all the time. That would be a wonderful thing for you. But listen, this glorified body is more than just not about hurting. This thing has aspects to it that are just almost indescribable. That's one glory. You're going to get that. But you're going to get more than that. You know that you're going to be offered a place in the heavenly places where there's a governmental setup. You're going to have a big throne up here. These things are all over the heavens, and they are principalities. My understanding is there's 24 of them spread out all through the creation. Underneath those, you say, well, that's not very many, 24. But underneath each of those principalities, there's multiple thrones that come under the designation of powers. A fully educated son, if he's fully educated, will qualify to sit on this throne in God's government and run 1/24 of the creature. Now, how big is the creature? We were talking before the service. You were saying these folks had thought, how many in our galaxy, how many Earth-type planets?
There could be over 1 billion in the Milky Way.
Just, right, now, they were saying now that they know how to look for them, in the Milky Way galaxy, there might be over 1 billion Earths. Planets. Well, we know that there are several, used to be 9 in the solar system until they degraded Pluto. And I'm protesting that. I think once you're a planet, right? Just because you're little, you don't qualify anymore. Okay, but you have these principalities, and then you have all these powers. By the way, would you expect that if you were in a position of power that you have sonship education? Yes, yeah. In fact, I would not be surprised that there aren't some fully educated sons that are actually powers, because the top places are going to be taken by the ones that are most qualified. So it wouldn't surprise me that someone would be a fully educated son. Wouldn't it be great if if you could live long enough for me to teach the whole curriculum, we could have a whole group of fully educated sons and daughters right here in this assembly. Now, wouldn't that be great? So you got to say there's more than 24 of us. Where are we going to be? Well, some folk, and by the way, the Apostle Paul's in here somewhere, right? And Timothy is in there somewhere. And the pastor to the Ephesians, Epaphras, he's in there somewhere. Titus is in there somewhere. We do know those guys are there. But then underneath these powers, now you have even more thrones that come in. And you know how a hierarchy works, and then you have these other delineations in the Scripture of thrones and dominion and might. Those things aren't just descriptive terms. They're talking about a whole setup in the government of God. Now you say, well, gosh, that looks like a lot of people in positions of power. It is. And now don't think about this. Listen, don't think about this in terms of our government in this country. Don't look at this and go, oh great, God wants me to be a bureaucrat. That's not what He wants you to look at here. Because of what you know, when you get out in those places, folks, we are literally going to become the intelligence of the creature. We're going to run that creature. And that thing is going to finally, for the first time, function the way that it is supposed to. And when I talk about the creature, I'm using the very word that the Apostle Paul uses in Romans chapter 8, that when we get back over there, he's not only going to tell you about that creature, but he's going to tell you some things about your part in that creature. And you know what that is? That's part of the glory. And yes, you will go through some sufferings. You'll go through some sufferings just because you live in a fallen world. And for those of us that are being educated as sons, we're going to go through a specialized kind of suffering that has a whole different glory associated with it, which is why Paul is going to say that he reckons that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. That's the glory. And once you get those things working in your mind, you're going to be in thinking like the Lord Jesus, where he's right there at the end of his life. They're about to nail him to the cross, and the guy's going, I want to know, are you the Christ? And he knows if he gives that answer, they're going to crucify him, but he knows why he's there. And he goes, yeah, you said it. He said, but I say to you, you're going to do what you're going to do, but here it is. You're going to see me sitting on the right hand of power. You're going to see me coming in the clouds of glory. What's he referring to when he's talking about that? What is he talking about, coming in the clouds? I go, what is that? That's his advent, isn't it, when he's coming back? He says, you know what he's looking for? He said, I know I got to go through those things here. And Jesus understood what that was. But he also understood there was a glory on the other side of that. You're going to be offered a glory that is not worthy to be compared with anything that you go through. Oh, brother, you've got to be kidding me. Okay. How does that happen? 8 minutes? This is just... Look, for you it may be an eternity, but I'm thinking, we're not... Okay, let me just give you some stuff. Are you ready? I have something on the PowerPoint here. We've been looking at all these things about the value of wisdom, and you have to understand that really when the doctrine is presented to you, you're going to be able to ask yourself questions like, what is it this world can really offer me that even holds a candle to what's being offered to me up there? Nothing. What relationship can I really have here that is going to equal the intimacy of relationship that I'm going to have with my Heavenly Father? None. You're really going to see the emptiness of what this world offers. And your Father means for you to see that emptiness. Does anybody know why? Think about the last session. Why does He need you to see the emptiness of what this world has to offer you? That's right. Because if you don't see that, you might be enticed off that path to walk in a different way. And He wants to make sure that you don't do that. So there are some things that you need. So I'm going to put it to you just like this. So, along with, I'm going somewhere, this will give you two things. Along with having strong convictions and confidence regarding the capacity of our Father's curriculum. You know what we're really talking about here? We're talking about the nature of the curriculum. Having strong convictions and confidence regarding the capacities of our Father's curriculum to do its job, see, which comes from being confronted with the nature of the curriculum. And here's the second thing, along with that and this, having implicit faith. Remember we talked about having that spirit of faith in whatever our Father teaches us, which comes from being confronted with the trustworthiness of God who wrote the curriculum. Along with that, our positive and proper response to what our Father teaches us should also include, and here it is, desiring above all else to obtain the sonship glories and being willing to obtain them at all cost, so that it becomes the very love of our life. And that comes from seeing the value of the effectual working of the curriculum. That makes sense? That's really where all this is pointed, to get you set up that you are successful in this curriculum. And that really is what he's after. Okay, now, in just the few minutes we have left, let's see if we can go back now and look at this Proverbs 1 passage. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. By the way, have you already done this to know wisdom and instruction? You know it exists. That's that. And you know it has value. So you've already done part 1 of phase 1. That really is your sonship orientation. That's why we're almost done with this. When we do this little part right here and we go back, that's going to be your sonship orientation. You know what comes after your sonship orientation? Your sonship establishment. And that's what to perceive the words of understanding is. That's where you're going to go back and you're going to have all of that given to you in Romans chapter 8. And if I had to show you in Romans where that is, let me see if I can't erase this so I can put something beside it. Because you know about those things already. That sonship orientation, that is Romans 8, 14 to 15. And your sonship establishment is Romans chapter 8, verses 16 to 39. You're almost through with part 1 of phase 1. The only thing we're doing is setting you up to go back over to those verses, knock those 2 verses out, and then you're on to 16 to 39. And this sonship establishment is absolutely critical. Consider it part of the education. Your father didn't skip this and he didn't leave this out for a very important reason. Now we could keep reading up here, but because of time, and I know you're familiar with this passage, so let me just take you to the one that we're looking at here in verse 3. To receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. And the thing that I want to talk to you about here is understanding this term instruction. What do you think of when you think of instructions? Huh? Learning? How to? When you get a little piece of, like a bookshelf or something, hopefully it comes with a set of instructions. It details all the little hardware that's in there and what plug goes into hole what and all that kind of bit. And what you're hoping is the whole thing is in English. It doesn't switch at number 4 to Japanese on you. Because then when you get through putting it together, you have 4 or 5 parts left over. Which, hey, as long as it doesn't fall apart, that works, right? And this gave you spares. A bunch of my kids' toys had spares. Just saying, when they were growing up. Here's the thing about instruction. I want to give you this. We think of instruction as a set of instructions or directions that you'd get, like when you put together a piece of furniture. The Oxford English Dictionary says the imparting of knowledge or skill or making known to a person what is required to do. Now those are all correct. But the instruction that's being talked about here has one more shade of meaning to it that I want to give you. Something to add to what it is that we're looking at here. So I think everybody gets this, right? You kind of already have that in your thinking. I sure hope I have this on the PowerPoint. The receiving of, in the sonship education, the receiving of directions or a body of information on how to do something that you don't know how to do, or with the ability to do something that you don't naturally have the ability to do. And this body of information on how to do something is information that previously I was totally ignorant of. That's how you're supposed to see this kind of instruction. And the way I'm saying it like that, and if I could abbreviate that, what I would say is the instruction that you're given here, you're supposed to perceive that that is instruction that without him telling you about it, you would never know how to do it. I'm not telling you you've never made a wise decision in your life. What I'm telling you is you have never made a decision out of godly wisdom. Now I know that I'm not trying to be offensive when I say that. I'm not. I'm saying the only way you can make a decision out of godly wisdom is to have been instructed in it. And when someone says, well, I love it when people want to, I call it call my bluff. When someone says, well, I think I have godly wisdom. If you really do, if you really have the godly wisdom, then you'll understand that when you start off right here in Romans chapter 12 and verse 3 to the end of the chapter, where you're instructed in godly wisdom, then you do understand all 6 components of it. And you'd be glad to give them to me, right? I'm not just talking about data here. I'm talking about you're not just going to be taught wisdom generally. Let me give you a list of stuff and we'll call it wisdom. He's teaching you how to think. And there are 6 particular ways in which he's going to teach you godly wisdom. In other words, if you're saying, I want to think about this like God my Father thinks about this, he's going to tell you, then there are 6 things you need to have down in order to start thinking like me. And all 6 of them are listed for you in Romans chapter 12. So when someone says to me, I think I have godly wisdom, I go, well, can you give me 3 of them? Because if you can't even name them, I wonder how you can use them. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to, instruction is in something we've never known before. I'm not standing up here like I'm someone who knew this all along. Are you kidding? I never knew this. It's worse than that. I didn't even know it existed. And until you get to Romans 12, you don't even realize there's 6 components of godly wisdom. In other words, you're going to use wisdom in 6 different ways. He's going to teach you how to think about every one of them. And all of that falls under the whole umbrella of godly wisdom. And then you're going to get an education in godly justice. And guess what? More than one component to that. Someone said, well, you don't tell me about justice. I've been in the criminal justice system for 15 years. But that's not godly justice. That's called keep the bad guys off the streets justice. By the way, it'll include a whole lot of that, but it's going to be godly justice. Then, godly judgment. Do you know why he's talking about this as godly judgment? Here's the reason he uses that term. This is great. I got to quit because the timer's up. He's calling it judgment because every once in a while, all the time, don't you run into a situation where you have a decision to make and neither one of those decisions are wrong? I mean, you look at it and you go, let's suppose that you get home and a guy calls you up, let's say you work in the oil field, and a guy calls you up and says, hey, we'd like to hire you over here. Is it wrong to stay with your present employer? No. Is it wrong to take another job? No. But people always do that. You know, my sister, I keep using this illustration because it really pictures this perfectly. She used to, in Shreveport, she worked at a place called Arkla Gas, Arkansas, Louisiana Gas Company. And she had a really good position there. But they went through a layoff. Now this is more than 10 years ago. I don't remember how long ago now. She's really old. Anyway, she'll love it when she hears that. They went through a layoff at the company and they said there's going to be massive layoffs here at the company. We're going to cut back. So here's what we're offering you. If you will voluntarily resign, then we're going to give them so many months of their pay to just keep right on going, and they would keep all of their family on insurance for a year. If you did not resign and you happen to be one of the ones laid off, you're going to just get a 2-week severance package plus whatever vacation you had, and your insurance is not going to continue past your employment date. That's going to be the end. Or you can stay on and take your chances, and maybe you don't get laid off, and you just get to keep doing your job like normal. So she calls me up and she lays the story out. She goes, what do I do? She said, because I don't know if I'm going to be one laid off or not. And we've got to have the insurance. She said, so if I take my chances and I'm laid off, Not only we don't have any income, we don't have any insurance. And I said, in my great wisdom back then, Sherry, I don't know what to tell you. I didn't. When your father teaches you the components of godly judgment, and that situation comes up for you, you'll never make that phone call. Now, I'm not dogging my sister out here because she made the phone call. I didn't know what to tell her. You know what? I try to think about it in my own wisdom. I try to think about, okay, well, let's look at it like this. And you know how you do it. You make your pro-con list and you think about it. And here's my situation and here's what I could do. And if this happened, what would that... You try to figure all that out. Wouldn't you love... This is what Christians always want to know. I'd like to know what God's will is about this. Of course, He's not looking at it going, here's what you better do or you're in big trouble. He's not doing that. But you know what? If you're saying, I'd like to know how my Heavenly Father would be thinking about this, that's what He's teaching you here. He is teaching you how to think about every single decision you will ever make exactly like He thinks about it. It's not asking yourself, what would Jesus do? Because you're just reckoning that out of your understanding again. He's saying, let me put my wisdom in you. And I'm going to teach you about how to make decisions between things that it's not a choice of right and wrong, but you've got, hey, I've seen a guy be a pastor at a church, and 2 other churches call him and say, we want you to come be our pastor. And you can do this all day long. You can go, oh God, please close the door. They're not. They're wanting. So my only point is this. This is what he needs. He needs godly judgment, decision-making skills. And equitable skills are those skills that you get to know how to treat a weaker brother. How to make decisions with someone else's best interest in mind and not yours. You say, I already know about not being selfish. But the way God's going to teach it to you, He's not just giving you a list. He is showing you how to really change the way you think about all of that. And I hope that this is the next PowerPoint that's up so I can end with it, and it's not. Great. Let's do this. So as your mind begins the process of being renewed, Romans 12, 1 and 2, remember, by the renewing of your mind, the things that used to guide your thinking, which is the old information that doesn't have any value, or the information that you acquired from the world, which is worthless, or the wisdom of this world, you recognize how worthless that is and that it's going to have to be replaced. And it's got to be replaced with what God's going to give you to replace it. And maybe, still not going to get there. Okay, so we'll do this when we come. So we'll take it up here when we come back. But here's the thing. Every decision, because I've got a chart, it's in your notes, but I've got these 4 out there, and I've got the converse to these out there. Because when you make a decision, you're either going to make it out of godly wisdom, or you're going to make it out of something else. And those are the things I'm trying to show you, because this... As we get ready to get back to Romans 8, this is what you're being set up for. This is going to be phase 2 of your level 1 education. And when you get this done, now by the way, I have to say this. I know we're over time, but I have to say this at the end. Don't get to thinking that just because you go through Romans, or get all the way through the book of Romans, and now you have those 4 decision-making skills in you, that you're as good at utilizing those as you'll ever get. That is not true. You'll have them and you'll know them, but like anything else, you know what you have to do? You have to put those into practice. And that's the apprenticeship part of what your Father's going to do. And we will utilize those skills as a church body. Yes! We're not going to look at things before the way we used to look at them. Now we're going to look, instead of us trying to figure out what's the best thing, now we're going to look at them differently. And we're going to go, hey, by the way, I just can't help it. I could drone on and on. I promise this is the last thing I say. When you get to an advanced level of your sonship, this is really great. Because when you're a simple son, you're going to go, okay, this is a decision that fits under wisdom. This is a decision that fits under judgment. Or this is a decision that fits under equity. I got it. But when you get over, but you are going to run into some decisions at the first part. You'll know what it is now because I'm tipping you off. that you're going to go, I don't understand which one this fits under. Mike told me that all of our decisions would fit under one of those 4 umbrellas. I don't know which one this fits under. But when you get advanced in your education, you're going to find that some decisions are a combination of these. They don't just fit under one, but they're going to actually require you to put 2, 3, or all 4 of those together to come to a godly decision. And you're going to have to learn how to do that. You'll have all the skills. It's just, have you ever worked with something? It's people that are really creative. You give them something and they do it, and then one day they come back and they go, did you know it would do this? And you go, how did you know that? They go, I don't know. I just, have you ever seen people like that? Well, think of it kind of like that. At the first, God's saying, okay, here's these 4 skills. And you're going to look up and say, I got these 4 skills. Later, though, you're going to go, hey, you know what? I can put wisdom and judgment together. And for this situation, where I was a little bit stumped before because I couldn't pigeonhole this thing, I now know how to combine these skills. All you're doing, you're not getting any more information. You're just learning how to better work with what you have. You ever seen those guys that are on those bicycles and they hit that ramp and they sail about 30 feet in the air and they're going upside down and they throw the bike off onto one side and it flips around once and they bring it back and they put their feet back on the pedals and hit the ground? Have you ever seen that? Do you realize if you sent me off that ramp, how many pieces I would be in at the bottom of that? I mean, I can't even imagine that. You know what? I look at that and I think, who knew you could ever do that? Because the way I grew up, nobody was doing that. You got on that 26-inch Schwinn, and if you did that on a 26-inch Schwinn, you're asking to kill yourself. Tell you now. But that's all we knew. We thought it was stretching the limit when we used to get on those little skateboards and tie a rope behind it, and somebody would go down the street, and we'd be skiing behind the bike on our skateboard. We thought that was it. But you know what? Someone took that and they went further with it and they went further with it. Here's what your Father says. I've already taken this thing as far as it will ever go. And I'm going to equip you to do all of this. But you're going to get opportunities, though, to get skillful with this. And you'll do it with your family. You'll do it in this church. You'll do it in your life. You'll do it. And He wants you to hone those skills. So when you get up into the creature and there's a decision to make, you do realize the more you get this, the more you move up in this until people are coming to you and they're going, Ruby, we don't know what to do. What are we going to do? Ask Mike. You know we're in trouble then. Look, but then Ruby's going to go, look, here's what you're going to do. You know why? She has the skills to make. You do realize that as part of what you're going to be doing in the creature, you're going to be making decisions. You're going to be given instructions of what needs to be done. It's going to be put into your hands. Gosh, I wonder what that creature is going to look like when we get through with it. Yes, ma'am?
This is April.
Yeah.
You know the world's going to end at the end of the year.
Yeah, right. 2012 Mayan calendar. Yeah, hurry up. Yeah, Mayan calendar. Okay. Yeah, the only thing I can say is the creature's in for a shock. What it thought it was just going to rejoice over, it's going to look at it and go, what? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, I know it. So anyway, I'm trying to just hold out for you and say, these are some of the glories. These are the things that you're going to be seeing, and these are the things that are out there. And it's the thing that separates what's waiting for you from anything this world could ever offer you. It's